Today we're going to look at some examples of art and culture in period 3. We've spent a fair amount of time this 6 weeks looking at the technology and religious aspect of culture, so today we're just going to focus on art. Although keep in mind, as we've discussed already, most art did have a religious element in this era. In 1000, a Japanese woman named Murasaki Shikibu used kana, an alphabet developed in the 9th century in Japan that allowed Japanese words to be written as they were pronounced, to write one of the world's most important works of literature, The Tale of Genji, which some view as the world's first novel. The book relates the experiences of a young prince as he grows up. Lady Murasaki spent her entire life at court, and her novel reflects the complex system of etiquette that had developed among the Japanese aristocracy. For example, lovers in Genji chose sheets of paper from multiple shades, each with its own significance, before writing notes to each other. At this point, if you are watching this at home, please pause and read the excerpt from Tale of Genji. The Epic of Sundiata is an epic poem of the Malinke people and tells the story of the hero Sundiata Keita, who died in 1255, the founder of the Mali Empire. The epic is an instance of oral tradition going back to the 14th century and narrated by generations of griot poets. There is no single authoritative version. Again, if you're watching this at home, please pause for a moment and read the Epic of Sundiata excerpt. Starting around 1150, people throughout Europe built cathedrals in the Gothic style, of which the Cathedral de Notre-Dame de Chartres is one of the best examples. High arched ceilings inspired awe in those who entered cathedrals, but medieval builders faced a major engineering challenge. Arches built in the traditional manner required thick walls to support them, otherwise the walls would buckle from the outward pressure. Two innovations allowed stoneworks to deflect the pressure away from the walls and build taller structures: vaults with ribs inside the church and flying buttresses outside the walls. Flying buttress systems have two key components: a massive vertical masonry block, the buttress, on the outside of the building, and a segment or quadrant arch bringing up the gap between that buttress and the wall. It's called the flyer. You can see an example of this on the handout that you should be using along with this lecture. Vault is an architectural term for an arched form used to provide a space within a ceiling or a roof. The parts of a vault exert lateral thrust that requires a counter resistance. When the vault is built above ground, various replacements are employed to supply the needed resistance. Buttresses are used to supply resistance when intersecting vaults are employed. So in a Gothic cathedral, you had to have both a vaulted ceiling and flying buttresses. Since the walls did not bear the weight of the ceiling, they could be cut away to hold glass windows, and most often these windows were stained glass windows. Stained glass as an art form reached its height in the Middle Ages when it became a major pictorial form used to illustrate the narratives of the Bible to a largely illiterate populace. While stained glass was widely manufactured, Chartres in France was the greatest center of stained glass manufacture, producing glass of unrivaled quality. The image on the screen previous to this of the Virgin Mary is from Chartres, and the blue is a very special blue that was perfected in Chartres and called Chartres blue. You can also see it on this screen. This is one of the 3 rose windows, this circular window, that are found in Chartres. This image here is from Sainte-Chapelle, and as you can see in this chapel, architects use all the architectural innovations to include these large windows, of which there are 15 monumental stained glass windows. Due to the prohibition in Islam of graven images, religious art in the Islamic world would focus on mosaics and calligraphy. As with Christian churches, mosques needed architectural elements like arches and domes to achieve the light and space both religions required for their sacred spaces. The mosques on the screen that are listed are the mosques we're going to be looking at in a minute. So this image is from the interior of the Great Mosque of Damascus, or the Umayyad Mosque, completed in 715, making it one of the oldest mosques in the world. When the mosque was built, it took 12 2,000 Byzantine craftsmen to incorporate the mosaics into the building. As you can see, there were a variety of mosaic designs chosen, but no images of people or of God. Thus far, it has survived the Syrian civil war, but other historic mosques in Syria have not been so lucky. These images are from the interior of the Great Mosque of Cordoba, which was started in 784 and completed in 987. Originally, after the conquest of Al-Andalus, the site was split between Christians and Muslims, but after 784 it became a site exclusively for Muslims. The building is most notable for its hall, with 856 columns, which you can see on the bottom. And this mosque is one of the best-known examples of Moorish architecture. Moorish architecture is the combination of Islamic iconography and Spanish iconography. Since the Reconquista, the site has been used by the Catholic Church, and in recent years there have been fights amongst the Roman Catholic Church and Spanish Muslims requesting the right to use the site to pray. This image is from the interior of the Jumaa Mosque of Isfahan, which was started in 771, but has been the site of continual construction since then. And because of that, this mosque represents a condensed history of Persian architecture. The vivid blues of the mosaics that you can see on the screen are what Persian art is best known for, and have been a continuity since the Persian Empire, as you hopefully remember seeing the use of blue in the art objects we looked at last 6 weeks. These images are from the Grand Mosque of Bursa, built between 1396 and 1399 by Ottoman Sultan Bayezid I. It showcases what the Ottomans are most famous for in their mosques, their calligraphy. The other aspects Ottomans were well known for were domes. The Grand Mosque of Bursa has 20 domes and 192 monumental wall inscriptions. The Inti Raymi was a religious ceremony of the Inca Empire in honor of the god Inti, one of the most venerated deities in Incan religion. It was a celebration of the winter solstice, the shortest day of the year in terms of time between sunrise and sunset, and the Inca New Year. In territories south of the equator, the Gregorian months of June and July are winter months. Inti Raymi is still celebrated in indigenous cultures throughout the Andes. Celebrations invoke music, colorful costumes, most notably the woven Ayahuma mask and the sharing of food. In many parts of the Andes, though, this celebration has been connected to the Western festivals of St. John the Baptist, which falls on the day after the northern solstice, June 21st. We're going to watch a part of the entrance dance of the Inti Raymi into Saskatchewan. You can see dancers entering from 3 corners. What you can't see is dancers entering from the 4th corner, but they are there, as I've been to an Inti Raymi festival. The reason they come from 4 corners is, remember, the Inca Empire considered itself the land of 4 corners. Sufism is a mystical aesthetic aspect of Islam. It is not a sect, rather it is considered the part of Islamic teaching that deals with the purification of inner self. By focusing on the more spiritual aspects of religion, Sufis strive to obtain direct experience with God by making use of intuitive and emotional faculties. that one must be trained to use. Sufi whirling is a form of sama, or physically active meditation, which originated among Sufis, which is still practiced by the Sufi dervishes of the Mevlevi order. It is a customary dance performed within the sima, or worship ceremony, through which dervishes aim to reach the source of all perfection, or kelma. This is sought through abandoning one's egos or personal desires by listening to the music, focusing on Allah, and spinning one's body in repetitive circles, which has been seen as a symbolic imitation of planets in the solar system orbiting the sun. Fashion can most often be considered a continuity, as a country's or region's traditional clothing rarely changes. South Asia has had a continuous fashion since the Indus River Valley civilization. On the screen, you can see a painting from the Gupta era of a woman dressed in a sari. On your handout that you should have received from your teacher, you will see a depiction of two representations of South Asian clothing that you can label if you want. The earliest known depiction of the sari in the Indian subcontinent is the statue of the Indus Valley priest wearing a drape. It is generally accepted that wrapped sari-like garments for the lower body, and sometimes shawls or a scarf-like garment for the upper body, have been worn by Indian women for a long time. They have been worn in their current form for hundreds of years. The tightly fitted short blouse worn under a sari is a choli, at least in some South Asian languages. Choli evolved as a form of clothing in the 10th century CE, and the first cholis were only front covering. The back was always bare, but covered with the end of the sari. There are more than 80 recorded ways to wear a sari. The most common style is for the sari to be wrapped around the waist, with the loose end of the drape to be worn over the shoulder, bearing the midriff. However, the sari can be draped in several different styles, though some styles do require a sari of a particular length or form. The akan originated in India as early as 2nd century BCE as court dress for nobles and royals, and was worn as everyday wear until the late 20th century by general population, and also by the princely states of South Asia. The akan traditionally has a side opening tied with strings and was traditionally worn with a sash wrapped around the waist to keep the entire costume in place. Clothing in pre-Columbian North America was made out of animal hides. Depending on which area of the country the tribes lived in, the hides could vary from buffalo to deer. Most of the clothing that has been preserved was clothing of a ceremonial nature. As you can see on the screen, the items that we're going to look at are highly decorated. This is a buckskin shirt from the Great Plains region and would have most probably been worn during a religious ceremony or dance. We know that because, again, of the decoration. This is a ceremonial headdress from the Great Plains and can only be worn by someone who has earned all the feathers on it. In other words, a war chief. This is an item symbolizing both military power, but also a religious item. To wear a headdress without earning it is prohibited under Native American beliefs and is quite offensive to Native Americans today. This buckskin dress from the Great Plains would have been worn most likely during either a religious ceremony or possibly a wedding. These are leggings from the Northeast and Great Lakes region, which we know because of the styles of the flowers on the leggings. Leggings would have been worn in winter in addition to a dress. We know these are leggings for women based on the design, but both men and women would wear leggings in the winter. And these are earrings from the Southwest region. We know this generally due to silver, which was more highly valued in the Southwest, and due to their size, we can conclude that they would have been worn on special occasions. Oh. When the weather was temperate, Mayan clothing was needed less as protection from the elements and more for personal adornment. Maya clerics and other dignitaries wore elaborate outfits with jewelry. Maya farmers wore minimal clothing. Men wore plain loincloths or a band of cloth wound around their waists, much like the men of North America. Some wore moccasins made of deer hide. Women possessed 2 items of clothing, a length of ornamented material with holes made for the arm and head, known as a cub. Both genders wore a heavier rectangle of cloth as a manta that functioned as an overwrap on cool days and as a blanket at night. It also served as a blind across the door. On the screen, you can see a depiction of the jaguar warrior, which would have been an outfit worn both in ceremonial activities, but also as those warriors went off to war. The most prevalent and influential aspect of women's clothing in ancient times is the huipil, which is still prominent in Guatemalan and Mexican culture today. The huipil is a loose rectangular garment with a hole in the middle for the head made from lightweight sheer cotton. The huipil is usually white with colorful cross striping and zigzag designs woven into the cloth using the brocade technique still commonly used today. The huipil could be worn loose or tucked into a skirt, and this would depend on the varying lengths. Huipils were important in displaying one's religious and tribal affiliation. Different communities tended to have different designs, colors, lengths, as well as particular huipils for ceremonial purposes. It was uncommon and often disgraceful to wear a huipil design from another community within one's village, although it was a sign of respect to wear a community's huipil when visiting another village. Although women were not just limited to their community's design, instead, the design offered an outline for what women were required to have, and within the community design, women were allowed creativity to make theirs different from others, often to express praise to different animals around the collar. The last little section of the handout you should have received from your teacher has some images from an illuminated manuscript. So these should help you understand what we're talking about here. An illuminated manuscript is a manuscript in which the text is supplemented with such decorations as initials, borders, and miniature illustrations. In the strictest definition of the term, an illuminated manuscript refers only to manuscripts decorated with gold or silver. But in both common usage and modern scholarship, the term refers to any decorated or illustrated manuscript from Western traditions. The Book of Kells is an illuminated manuscript gospel book in Latin. It was created in a Columban monastery in either Britain or Ireland, or may have had contributions from various Columban institutions from both Britain and Ireland. It is believed to have been created circa 800. It is a masterwork of Western calligraphy and represents the pinnacle of insular illumination. Insular is the style of art in the British Isles post-Roman Empire. It is also widely regarded as Ireland's finest national treasure. The illustrations and ornamentation of the Book of Kells surpass that of other insular gospel books in extravagance and complexity. The decoration combines traditional Christian iconography with the ornate swirling motifs typical of insular art. Figures of humans, animals, and mythical beasts, together with Celtic knots and interlacing patterns in vibrant colors, enliven the manuscript's pages. Many of these minor decorative elements are imbued with Christian symbolism and so further emphasize the themes of the major illustrations. On the screen, you can see an illustration of St. Matthew. While illuminated manuscripts technically just refer to Western books, we do see illustrated texts in other regions. The Lotus Sutra is one of the most popular and influential Mahayana sutras, or Buddhist scripture. For many East Asian Buddhists, the Lotus Sutra contains the ultimate and complete teaching of the Buddha, and the reciting of the text is believed to be very auspicious. The bottom image is from a Goryeo, or Korean dynasty, illustrated scroll in 1340. The upper image is from an illustrated scroll from the Kamakura shogunate in Japan in 1257. If you're watching this at home because you weren't in school either Monday or Tuesday before Thanksgiving break, what we're going to ask you to do now is what the students in class would have already been doing throughout the lecture. Take a moment to think about some similarities and differences between the regions we've discussed and the styles of art and what that might mean for that region's culture. Maybe jot some notes down on the handout that's been given to you.